get into more into that later. That was just 3 days a week I did that, running routes through the country picking up eggs.
And where was he set up? Where was he set up?
Oh, he was set up in Grandma Sandy's, where Grandma Sandy's daycare is now, to the backside. Was the only way you could get in was the front door, but there was a trap door where the conveyor would come out and you'd convey the eggs in and back out.
How old were you when you were driving down to Chicago?
2021 or something like that. Just a while before I was drafted. Then I thought I was ready to graduate to a full-time job. But my Uncle Leo owned a store, locker plant, slaughterhouse in Fox Lake. Store up front, then a locker plant and cutting room, and a slaughterhouse way in the back. He talked me into going to working at a shoe factory in Fox Lake. So it was shortly before Christmas I started there. The whole year of 1957, that's where I worked. I learned two things there. That I didn't want to work in a factory, and it was a union shop. Now, some of you will argue with me, you can have your own opinion, but that union didn't do anything for me except take a little out of my paycheck every time. Then the guy that had the egg business expanded more. He bought out a guy from Montello. He needed full-time help, so he hired me back full-time. And when I still ran the routes, but then he initiated me to doing the deliveries in Chicago. So Mondays was Chicago day. Around noon or after, we'd have the truck loaded up and head out to Chicago. He had a sister that lived in Des Plaines. She had a room up there where we would roost overnight, get up at 6 in the morning, make our first delivery in the Des Plaines to Des Plaines at the depot there, the dairy and milk depot. Get that done. Go south to South Chicago. Now, mind you, there were no GPSs then. There were no interstates. The only interstate was that went through the post office part way. It was at Congress Expressway. So we took that part way. But anyway, I made that trip with him twice with my boss. After that, I drove it by landmarks. Got here, oh, here's a Woolworth store, here's where I turned, here's this store. And that's the way I got done. And those were our major deliveries. The Chicago Stockyards was going full blast at the time. We did private sales at the Exchange Building. Take these carts similar to what you have when you wheel your luggage into a hotel or motel, put a cases of eggs on there, went to the Exchange Building, and as soon as you hit the doorway, the messages got out somehow. Went up floor to floor, and they just mob you. It was like a mob coming at you. Then there was a TV appliance store. We did the same thing, just private treaty sales. Right by the Stockyards was a fancy restaurant, Stockyards Inn. We supplied the eggs to them, like I think 2 cases every week we had to drop in there. That was, had to go through a room, and without fail, every time you went through this room, there were 2 Hispanic ladies peeling and processing onions. I don't know why I remember that, but it was just a constant thing.
How did they pay you? How did they pay you? When you
Well,
sold?
some of these big accounts, they sent a check to him, but the, like at the Exchange Building and at the store, that was all cash. I'd come out of there with $700-800 of cash in my pocket. Nowadays, you wouldn't live to come out of Chicago. Let's see. At the same time, I got to know Don Olson at the bar. He convinced me that he needed me to tend bar for him. So
Where Renard's now is.
Okay.
I tended bar Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday morning. First drink was on the house, so there was a final, people came from church for the final blessing.
And he was a one-armed bartender, come on.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody knows that. And Father Joe always came on Sunday too.
But also the best ham sandwiches.
Yeah.
They had it was a
And really
popular,
good root beer.
Right.
it was a popular fish fry on Friday night. It was perch. And Don put me to work for a couple hours and kind of learned the ropes. The tap box was in the middle with the beer tappers. It's the cutoff. That's your half, this is my half. Go at it. So that's the way we worked. And Saturday night was roasted chicken. Same thing. Sometimes there was 3 deep at the bar. It was really well accepted. And of course, Sunday morning, when the kids stop in and get your first drink on the house, it was busy too for a couple hours. So I must have impressed, there was a guy who also came in quite a bit from Montello. He owned a little resort and bar as you're exiting to the west. His name is Irv Steffen. He'd stop, he knew Don because Don ran a gamble store in Montello at one time. So he'd visit Don. But I must have made a good impression on him with my bartending, because he wanted to hire me away to a full-time bartending job. I wouldn't have that. I did get a good taste of bar ownership, but this will happen a little later. I did the Egg Route Chicago, okay. Next came 1958. The greatest thing that ever happened to me happened in 1958. I met Barbara Rhodey at the time. I should thank her dad probably. He was an entrepreneur of sorts. He farmed where in Rock Springs or in that area. He custom farmed during World War II. He was a motorcycle cop at the powder plant in Baraboo. And I'm probably skipping some things, but in the meantime, he went and bought a hardware store in Lake Mills. Then he bought Shell Station in Green Lake, and that's what brought her to me.
And a founding member of Baraboo Cenex,
Oh, he was?
where I worked
Yeah.
at one time.
Yeah,
Okay.
as we went around, one of
Yeah.
the first jobs was where my dad
Yeah.
worked years before.
Cenex Co-op.
So from 58, she chased me until I caught her. And come the day after Christmas, 1959, we got married, and Father Chichorka, who you spoke of, he's the one that tied the knot. He must have tied it pretty tight, because this coming day after Christmas, we'll be together for 65 years.
Wow.
And let's see, I also, my boss that I drove the beer truck for, the egg truck, sold his business. He was, got colon cancer, and he sold his business. The guy across the street had a beer distributorship. He says, I need a route man. So I went to work there driving a beer truck. So I could brag to my buddies, I made every bar in Marquette, Green Lake, and Washare County every week. Or I could tell them I spilled more beer in a day than they drank. And also we had a soda, he also had a soda route. It was, we got our soda out of Stevens Point. Dad's Good Root Beer was our flagship. But there was, they also canned a flavor, or bottled, just, I gotta explain, this was all glass bottles at the time, returnable glass bottles. And just a whole big string of flavors of soda too. Bubble Up was their 7-Up type of drink. I don't remember that they had a cream soda, but they had strawberry, cherry, grapefruit, lime, just grape and orange. And those mostly filling stations had, we serviced with that. Dad's root beer we did in grocery stores quite a bit. Plus the bars. So then came later 1959. My ex-friends and neighbors sent me a letter that said, we have decided that you need to go to the Army, the draft board. So October 14th, 1959, I was drafted. Went to Milwaukee and it was processed in. I got to tell a funny here, as they were giving us our physical in some military-owned building there, they had us on upper floor someplace, all in our underwear. Had a cart with a bunch of glass beakers there. Okay, pick out one of these beakers and pee in it. One guy says, "Way from here?" I think he went to cook school. So then I put in 2 years and almost 4 months in the Army. I was supposed to put in 2 years. Then the Berlin crisis came up and I was involuntarily extended. I was supposed to get out 24th of October, I believe, and I didn't get out till the following 12th of February. Which I wouldn't have stayed anyway, but when you're drafted, they know you're only going to be in there for 2 years, so pay scale is pretty much on the lower side. So that put me over 2 years, and it was a nice hefty pay raise for a few months. But at the same time I was in service, number one daughter was born. She was born at Womack Army Hospital at Fort Bragg. That was cheaper than my birth even, I think. $7 to $8 or something. That was just for some food for Barb, I think.
Because as a girl and I'm left-handed, that's why. Discount rate.
But there was another perk to me staying in for these extra 3.5 months or so, because daughter number 2 was expected. She was born during that time, so that was she was about as expensive as I was. $25, the government paid the rest. So first 2 were pretty cheap. Then I got out of the Army, and by then egg business, of course, was gone. In the meantime, the beer business was gone, and these guys sold that out or whatever. So my father was a customer of Les Frederick, who had oil business on Skelly Road. I think Yoctober's got apartments there now. He was going to need a driver for one of his fuel trucks when things picked up in spring, when the farmers would hit the field. So I got out in February, and he didn't really need me till April, so I pulled unemployment for a whole $34 and something a month, I think. But going back to Don, where I bartended, he said, "Rona and I have not had a vacation since you left." So somehow or another, he pulled the strings, got the city council together to get me a bartender's license real fast. And I put me to work running the bar for 3 weeks, took a vacation. So I got a pretty good idea what bar business is like. I know what the hours are like. I got a pretty good idea of the cash flow, because I did everything. Ordered it, I signed the checks, just like I was running the place. So I think I had an idea there that business could be okay, but the hours are bad. So anyway, for 3 weeks I ran the bars, so I got a little bit beside the unemployment. So then I started work for Les Frederick, driving a fuel truck. And that only lasted till toward fall. The guy that ran the Condon malt plant was Jerry Washkowiak. He bought the Skelly business. So then the Condon Oil Company came to me, hired me, or took me from Fredericks to run the Condon Oil malt plant. So for a couple of years or so, I ran the Condon Oil malt plant. And then they, even though they had a credit manager, they came and said they wanted me to be responsible for collecting the debts, the old bad debts. And that's not for me to go hammering on somebody's door and say pay up and all that. So I resigned. And about a week or so later, Del Monte Corporation had an ad in the paper. They were looking for help as that time of year, the college crew was going back to school. So I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll go work there for a little while, get my nose wet in the canning business. 30 years later, I retired. That was the later years, the glamour kind of faded away, but early years, that was a super place to work. Besides, they had a perk where once a year, a couple times a year, we could buy dented canned goods. But once a year, everything that canned pretty anywhere in the world, we could buy at a very reduced rate. So we didn't really go do any gardening or anything. We could buy canned goods at a good rate. So on September 1st of I worked 1965 to 1995, and I retired September 1st. A little bit before that, our plant superintendent retired. Supposedly, there's no time off during canning season, but he retired during canning season, and I put in my paperwork to retire September 1st. He came to visit one night. He was giving me a hard time. You can't retire during canning season. I said, you know, we had a superintendent that did that. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. You got a point. So after Del Monte came the bison business. I got to thank my ex-son-in-law for getting us into that. He thought I was too young to still flop back in my lazy boy and watch the world spin. So he kind of got us into it. September 13th of 1995, which was Friday the 13th, we got our first animals on the farm.
13 animals.
Now, you're supposed to have a financial plan, marketing plan. We had nothing. We had bison.
13 animals.
But things worked out beautifully for us. And I'm happy to see one of our great customers here. And there were many more besides, but you were one of our favorites. Anybody that bought is a favorite. After I retired, I also got hired by the Princeton School District. They had a group of kids that you might say were troubled a little bit. They went to school half days to get a GED in Wautoma. So I transported them, picked them up in the morning, by noon we were back, so I had afternoons to myself, which was I don't know how, and at the same time, I was approached if I wanted to run as a board member for FS Co-op. Yeah, I put my name on. Ray Salabago was already a member. I thought, well, he'll just get elected back in there. No, he pulls his name out. So I served on the FS board for quite some time, a few years. And that gets me back to Princeton. We're going to talk about, we talked about how many bars there were in Princeton and so on. So that we won't need to touch that. But I kind of deliberated back filling stations. We could start on the west end of town, right where Mobile is now. There was Christie's Standard Station there. Get to the bridge where Vinnie's Repair is, Drager had a gas station there. Get to this side of the bridge where Frozen Tundra is, that was a Shell station at the time. Right next door, between the Tundra and the bank, was a station now this is going to be a double header. There was a DX pumps there. Then where Mike Callis is now, that was Texaco. Right across from our museum, Miller Implement had pumps there. They were primarily for their own use, I believe. But if you wanted to buy gas from them, they'd sell it to you. Then we're on the highway, right? A string of businesses where Gagny's is. Jules Fensky had a Sinclair station there. Then on the corner, I was still on Gagny's lot. Gallagher had a mobile station there. Then across from the American House, at one time, that was a Ford garage there. They had gas pumps in front of the place. Where Grizzy's is now, that was Parkside Tavern. They had gas pumps out there. Right across the street where, right across the street from Community Hall. That was the airport bar. They had a mobile station, mobile pumps there. And then where the cop shop is, that was another standard station. So there were a lot of choices to fill up your car.
Why would they need so many of
No,
them?
it's so many.
That's interesting.
We had auto dealers in Princeton. The same station where I said, same place where the DX was, where just this side of the Frozen Tundra. That was a Plymouth Dodge dealership. And of course, once upon a time, across from the American House, that was the Ford dealership. Where Pulvermacher's is now was a Chevy dealership. They built and went out to where Gagny's Body Shop is now. Implement dealers. Right across from the museum. That used to be International Harvester Farm Hall. Right beside the museum was Alice Chalmers, where the driveway goes in.
Yeah.
There used to be a few tractors parked there, and then right down the driveway, they owned that building. They did repair and blacksmith type work down there. Hank Graham's owned the business, and his son-in-law, Red Clark, did the mechanical work on it. Ford was right about where the U.S. Bank is. That was just a little building at one time where U.S. Bank is on the corner. There was a Ford tractor implement shop right there. John Deere started out when Van Swanson ran a feed mill where Soulhammer is. He puddled around a little bit with John Deere there. Then it moved where Grandma Sandy's is, in the front part of that. Our Dreblow ran that, I believe. we'll just run down what that block from US Bank down to the corner of where Gagny's is. At one time, there was a little feed store right on that corner. Then I think came the Ford dealership. Then Pulvermakers, or it was Priskey's at one time, and Pulvermakers bought it. Then there was the Sinclair station. Let's see, what was in between? Oh, then the new Ford garage was built in there. It was much smaller when Buchan built it. And then the mobile station on the corner. So there were quite a few businesses right in that block. Grocery stores. Going back again to where Mobile is on the other side of town, Christie's station was on the corner. Right beside Christie's was a little store in the front and a 3-stool bar in the back. It was run by Tony Kalupa. And then, of course, Swed's, the model for Kmart. And right across from, let's see, right across in the middle of the block from Twister's to the west was a little store. Arnold Call ran that once. Herky Bartle ran that once. Schwister's ran it once. And I think Walter Walker ran it once.
Yep.
And then in the middle of the couple stores down where, somewhere right where Beer Bellies is that area, was a kind of a clothing store, grocery store, Teskey's. Across from that was IGA store at one time on the other side of the street. Where Lehner's law office is now, Yar used to have a grocery store. And there was archway built into what is now the Buckhorn Bar. There was a clothing store that he ran both of those. Eventually he moved, when the Ford garage moved out of this building on Water Street, Yar moved his grocery store in there. Meat markets. There was Litke's Meat Market, right beside where the old pharmacy just closed up. Mego's across the street. Zudro's. And of course, the Prisky Pulvermakers. Mego's, I guess, used to go there once in a while with my mom when I was a kid. Just in remembrance of my uncles working there. Hey, here's a wiener for you. A wiener to chew. I was with my mom. Barbershops. There was 4 of those, would you believe it? Keeneman's right across from, pretty much from our museum. Tiff, where Dave worked. Bornick was next block, like where the Pastimes just closed up somewhere in there. And that's where Carby's was, right in that area too.
Yeah.
There are 2 beer distributorships. The one I worked for was Budweiser. Vic Drill had Old Style. Hardware stores, 2 of them. Where Twister is now, that used to be pretty big Hot Mars Hardware. At one time, I think that's the vacant lot right beside the old pharmacy. Knox had a hardware store there. They, and a guy by the name of Leo A. Strike worked for them, and I think he bought them out and then built the building where the clinic is on the corner, and that was a hardware store at one time. 2 lumber yards. Chamber of Commerce, that little building that they have now, was the office for Warnke's Lumberyard. They had lumberyard across, they had coal bins of all kinds. They did seed, feed, everything a farmer wanted. And Geezy's were just this side of them. And when when the Chevy garage pulled out, where Pulvermacher's is now, Giesi's assumed that as their office and showroom for a lumberyard. Was a stockyard. From where the McCormick Deering was across the street from, across the street from our museum, a little further to the west, Lichtenberg Brothers had a stockyard there. They had, I think, like at least three trucks. They used to run around, pick up from farmers, consolidate it there. They had a semi that George Petruski drove that semi and took the animals to Madison. Now, I don't remember what slaughterhouse. I want to say it was Cudahy, but Cudahy was in Milwaukee, I think, more so.
Oscar Mayer.
Oscar Mayer, thanks. That was it, Oscar Mayer. 2 feed mills, where Soulhammer is. That was a feed mill at one time. FS Co-op operated out of there. Originally, down River Road, where it intersects with Harris Street, there was a mill there. And way back, people by the name of Moritz ran it. I think it was actually water powered at one time, but that was way before. Emphasis on the I think. But I know there was water power going to the electric power plant. I think that went beyond. And then they rebuilt, they closed that mill, or did it burn down? Now that anyway, Fisher's built a new mill building, or rehabbed a building for a mill in Warnke's Lumberyard. They had a mill in Kingston and Marquezan. They expanded here to Princeton. And later they abandoned that and built a new one on a hilltop out of town.
Can I tell a story about the new feed mill? I like to go with my dad to the feed mill because they had like this little cooler you could open up, and sometimes we'd split a Coke.
With the glass bottle. And
Glass
you had to leave
bottle.
it- You had to drink it fast because
You had to leave the bottle there.
Feed and seed stores, we had 3 of those in town. The building that the museum is in, that was a feed and seed store. The little building that I spoke about that was right on the corner where the US Bank is now, at one time that was a feed and seed store. And then one middle of the part of the Gagney lot toward the, it borders the old pizza factory,